I've heard enough of your tall tales, old man Hargrove. That house ain't cursed. It's just falling apart. Evelyn's voice sliced through the murmur like a cold blade, sharp and unyielding. Her fingers splayed across the scarred oak table, as if to anchor herself against the creeping doubt. The tavern's lanterns flickered dimly, casting elongated shadows that writhed across the walls, where faded posters of harvest festivals peeled away like forgotten skin. Thick smoke from clay pipes coiled upward, saturating the air with the heavy scent of damp wood and sour ale, while the low creak of floorboards under shifting boots pierced the uneasy hush. Jacob leaned forward, his broad shoulders hunched in the dim light, eyes scanning the tense faces around the circle of mismatched chairs. Tall tales or not, we all felt it. Lights out, dead as a grave, right in the middle of, well, you know. His words trailed off, a protective instinct flaring as he glanced at Maya beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap, knuckles pale against the wavering glow. He reached out, offering a subtle squeeze to her arm, but she remained still, her gaze locked on the flickering flame of a nearby candle, as if beseeching it to steady the turmoil churning within her. The group, farmers with calloused hands roughened by endless toil, a seamstress clutching her threadbare shawl, a few wide-eyed youths, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The blackout had struck without mercy the night before, plunging the village into an inky abyss where clocks ground to a halt and whispers took insidious root. Routines lay shattered, cows milked in stumbling darkness, children wailing for light that refused to return. Now, huddled here in the Black Boar, the oldest tavern with its iron-bound door and walls that seemed to lean inward like a tightening noose, they traded stories like forbidden contraband, each word laced with the chill of unspoken dread. Hargrove, his grizzled beard streaked with gray like veins of ash, chuckled low and rasping, the pipe stem clicking against his yellowed teeth. Falling apart, eh? Tell that to my cousin Elias, who went poking around those fields 20 years back. Came home raving about eyes in the windows, shapes that slithered when no one was there. Next morning, gone. Just gone. His eyes gleamed with a challenging glint in the smoky haze, as he puffed a ring of smoke that lingered like a spectral noose, heavy and unyielding. Evelyn's pulse quickened beneath her skin, a familiar itch urging her to peel back the layers of deception. She leaned in closer, ignoring the way Jacob's grip tightened on his mug, knuckles whitening. Details, Hargrove. What exactly did Elias say? The blackouts started around then, didn't they? Coincidence? Her voice held steady, but anxiety gnawed at the edges. Flashes of unraveling truths that threatened to drag her under, her fragile control slipping away like dry sand through clenched fingers. A youth at the table's end, freckled and fidgety, piped up with a nervous edge. Bet you wouldn't last a night there yourself, Miss Evelyn. All that book learning won't save you from what's inside. Laughter rippled through the group, brittle and forced like cracking ice, but it died swiftly when Maya finally stirred, her whisper barely cutting through the scrape of a shifting chair. I don't want to hear this. She pulled her arm away from Jacob, not harshly, but enough to carve a widening space between them. The oppressive weight of the room bore down on her chest, the farmhouse's shadow stretching its tendrils even here, ensnaring her in its relentless pull. Escape tugged at her thoughts. Flee to the distant hills, anywhere but this endless cycle of fear. But her feet remained rooted, withdrawal enveloping her like a suffocating shroud. Jacob's face hardened, paranoia flickering in the subtle flex of his jaw. No one's going anywhere near that place. Not while I'm breathing. It's poisoned the well enough already. His words aimed to shield, but they isolated further, the group's eyes turning speculative, silent dares forming on parted lips amid the thickening tension. Hargrove raised his glass, foam sloshing sluggishly. To the brave ones, then, who'll draw the short straw? The circle tightened imperceptibly, voices overlapping in a low hum of speculation, each tale weaving deeper into the night, the farmhouse's secrets coiling tighter around their throats like invisible vines. Unease settled like fine silt in still water, stirring fractures in their fragile world, where routine had cracked open and darkness seeped through the fissures. The tales lingered like acrid smoke in the dim tavern air, Evelyn's dismissal doing little to dispel their icy grip on Clara's thoughts. Hours bled slowly into night, the oppressive weight of unspoken suspicions pressing down as shadows lengthened across cracked walls. Sleep evaded her, mind ensnared by whispers of hidden truths within the forsaken farmhouse. By dawn's reluctant light, resolve hardened. Flashlight in hand, she stepped toward the unraveling mystery, heart thudding with foreboding certainty. It's not just stories, Jacob. That blackout hit right when the thunder rolled in, like the house itself swallowed the power. Liam's voice sliced through the dim flicker of the single lantern on the kitchen table. His notebook splayed open, pen scratching notes even as shadows clawed at the edges of the room. The air inside their cramped cottage carried the faint, acrid tang of extinguished candles, mingling with the earthy scent of damp wood from the walls that seemed to sweat in the chill. Outside, the village lay shrouded in unnatural silence, broken only by distant murmurs filtering through the thin panes like ghostly echoes. Jacob leaned forward, his broad shoulders casting a hulking silhouette against the wavering light. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, fixed on Liam. Whispers or not, we're staying put. No one's fool enough to go poking around that ruin tonight. His words came low, laced with the weight of unspoken warnings, fingers gripping the edge of the table until the knuckles gleamed pale in the gloom. He glanced at Maya, curled in the corner armchair, her knees drawn up like a barrier against the encroaching dark. She hadn't spoken since the lights died, her gaze lost in the middle distance, as if the darkness had already claimed a fragment of her soul. Maya shifted slightly, the fabric of her sweater whispering against the armrest like a secret. Her breath came shallow, each inhale pulling in the oppressive chill that seeped from the cracks in the walls. She wanted out, away from this suffocating huddle, from the house's invisible pull that seemed to echo even here, miles from its sagging porch. But the blackout pinned her down, trapped her in this fragile circle of family, where every shadow twisted into a looming threat. Liam ignored Jacob's glare, flipping a page with deliberate slowness. Foolish or brave? You heard Hargrove earlier. Evelyn shut him down, but the old man's eyes, he knows something. And now this. Power out, everyone on edge. His ambition burned in the way he leaned in, voice quickening just a fraction, chasing the thrill of the unexplained amid the stifling air. He jotted another line, oblivious to how his words frayed the already thinning thread between them. What if this was it? The proof he'd been chasing. Dismissal stung worse than any ghost, a shadow lingering in his mind. A sharp knock rattled the door, jolting them all like a thunderclap. Jacob rose in one fluid motion, hand hovering near the latch, body positioned to shield the room from whatever lurked beyond. "Who is it?" His tone brooked no nonsense, caution etching deeper lines into his face, the lantern's glow hollowing his features. "It's Clara, from down the lane," came the muffled reply, edged with defiance that cut through the wood. The door creaked open under Jacob's cautious pull, revealing her silhouette against the inky night, rain-slicked hair clinging to her forehead like wet vines. She held a flashlight steady, its beam cutting a pale swath across the threshold, illuminating droplets tracing down her skin. No coat, just determination etched in her tight smile. "I couldn't wait. The tales, they're pulling me. I'm going in. Tonight. See for myself if it's all rot or something more." Maya's head snapped up, eyes widening. Not with curiosity, but a flicker of something colder, sharper. Clara's words hung there, too eager, too pointed amid the heavy air. Why her? Why now, when the village reeled from the sudden plunge into dark? Liam straightened, notebook forgotten, his curiosity igniting like dry tinder in the gloom. "Clara, wait, let me come. I can document it, make it real." Jacob blocked the doorway wider, his frame a solid wall against the night. "You're not thinking straight. That place, it's not a game." Paranoia flickered in his chest, hot and insistent. Protect them, all of them, before the house claimed another soul. But Clara's gaze slid past him, locking onto Maya, who shrank back further, suspicion coiling in her gut like smoke. Was this bravery or a lure? The farmhouse's shadow seemed to stretch even here, whispering fractures into their fragile trust. Clara stepped forward anyway, flashlight dipping toward the floor in a hesitant arc. Truth doesn't wait for permission. She turned, vanishing into the gloom, leaving only the echo of her footsteps fading into the rain-soaked night, and a village fracturing under suspicion's relentless weight. Liam half rose, torn between pursuit and restraint, while Jacob's hand slammed the door shut, sealing the dread inside with a final, resounding thud. Hours later, as the lantern's glow faded into uneasy silence, Clara slipped away from the kitchen's stifling air, her pulse echoing the storm's distant rumble like a warning drum. The farmhouse's shadows pressed heavier upstairs, dust-laden corridors whispering of forgotten secrets through the gloom. Drawn by an inexplicable pull, she pushed open a creaking door, the oppressive weight of the unknown settling like fog in her chest, dread coiling tighter with each hesitant step into the enveloping darkness. "Have you noticed how the walls seem to lean in when the lights go out?" Maya's voice cracked the silence, her words barely above a whisper as she huddled at the kitchen table's edge, arms wrapped tight around her knees like a fragile barrier. The lantern's flame danced erratically, casting jagged shadows that twisted across the peeling wallpaper, like veins pulsing beneath taut skin. Liam paused mid-scribble, his pen hovering over the notebook's frantic lines. He glanced up, eyes sharp with that unyielding curiosity, the kind that pulled him deeper into the house's grip, while others recoiled from its touch. "It's not the walls, Maya. It's the blackouts, longer each time, like the house is feeding on the dark. I need to map this, understand it." His voice held an edge of excitement, undercut by the faint tremor in his hand as he flipped a page, ignoring the way the floorboards creaked under his chair, as if protesting his relentless plans. Evelyn stood by the doorway to the hall, her fingers digging into the splintered frame, nails bitten raw from nights of endless pacing. She had been silent since Liam's last rant about the thunder-timed outage, her mind churning through fragments of rumors from the neighbors, whispers of shapes in the fields, voices echoing from empty wells like distant cries. "Understanding won't stop it," she said finally, her tone clipped, laced with the anxiety that gnawed at her resolve like rust on iron. "We need proof, something real." Without waiting for agreement, she pushed off the wall and slipped into the corridor, her footsteps muffled by layers of dust that clung to everything like a second, suffocating skin. The house exhaled around her, air thick with the musty scent of forgotten corners, the faint metallic tang of rust from pipes long dormant and weeping. Evelyn's flashlight beam sliced through the gloom of the upstairs study, illuminating shelves sagging under warped books and cobweb-draped curios that swayed faintly in the draft. She moved methodically, drive overriding the knot of dread tightening in her chest. Control the chaos, or let it swallow you whole. Her hand brushed a loose panel in the oak desk, and it gave way with a soft click, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside lay a leather-bound diary, its cover cracked and stained like weathered bone, pages yellowed with age and secrets. She pulled it free, heart thudding against her ribs like a trapped bird, as she sank into a threadbare armchair that groaned under her weight, protesting the intrusion. The first entry blurred in the shaky light. October 12th. The vision started again tonight. Faces in the mirror, not mine, pleading. The blackout came, and the house whispered my name. Elias, over and over, like it knew me. Evelyn's breath hitched, caught in her throat. Further pages spilled horrors, shadows detaching from walls to circle the bed, blackouts stretching hours into eternity, the farm's fields twisting into labyrinths that trapped livestock overnight. It's alive. It hungers for our fears, amplifies them until we break. I see it now. The house isn't haunted. It haunts us back. The words seeped into her, cold and insistent. Downstairs, Maya's gaze flicked to the hall, her body rigid with the urge to bolt, to shatter a window and flee into the night. But the door's latch felt miles away, heavy with invisible chains that bound her. Liam, what if it's not just stories? What if staying here changes us? Her voice quavered, withdrawal pulling her inward, away from his probing stare that pierced the dimness. Liam leaned forward, ambition flickering in his eyes like the lantern's unsteady flame. That's why we document, to fight it. But even as he spoke, doubt crept in like fog through the cracks. His fear of irrelevance, paling against the growing certainty that the house watched, waited with patient malice. Evelyn burst back into the kitchen, diary clutched like a talisman against her chest, her face ashen, eyes wide with the madness she dreaded most. You were right about it swallowing the power. But this is worse. She thrust the book forward, pages fluttering open, to visions that mirrored their own creeping unease, the air growing heavier with each revealed line. The air in the room thickened further, the house's pulse sinking with their quickened breaths. Blackouts looming, not as accidents, but invitations to dread's unrelenting embrace. The lantern's glow dimmed further, Maya's whispered warning, coiling through the shadowed kitchen like insidious smoke, its unease seeping into every corner and crevice. Hours bled into the oppressive night, drawing Clara upstairs to the labyrinth of halls, where her budding excitement twisted into dread. Paranoia bloomed as faint whispers stirred from the walls, slithering closer, insisting she shared the house with unseen eyes that bored into her soul. Liam gripped the lantern's handle tighter, its metal biting into his palm like cold teeth as he swung it toward the shadowed hallway. The flame sputtered weakly, illuminating Evelyn's pale face where she stood frozen at the kitchen threshold, her notebook clutched like a fragile shield against the encroaching dark. Jacob loomed behind her, his broad shoulders blocking the faint glow from the single bulb overhead, his eyes darting to every corner, as if expecting the walls to crack open and spill forth horrors. "The whispers," Evelyn murmured, her voice slicing through the thick silence that had swallowed Maya's earlier words. She stepped forward, boots scuffing against the warped floorboards, chasing the sound that had slithered into her ears moments ago. Soft, insistent murmurs weaving through the house like smoke tendrils. At first, in the dim kitchen light, she dismissed it as the wind rattling loose shutters, a rational anchor to cling to amid the chaos. Her drive pulsed stronger now, the need to document, to unravel the blackout's grip on this place, overriding the knot twisting in her gut like barbed wire. Liam followed, his notebook already open, pencil scratching furiously against the paper. "Describe it. Exact pitch, direction." His curiosity burned brighter than the lantern, ambition fueling each hurried note, even as the house's oppressive weight pressed down, the air stale with dust and something sharper, like ozone before a storm that never broke. He ignored the way his shadow stretched unnaturally long behind him, a distraction from the real peril. The blackouts stretching longer each night. Neighbors whispering of shapes in the dark, eyes watching from empty windows with unblinking malice. Jacob's hand shot out, clamping Evelyn's arm with iron strength. "Stop. We go back. Now." His voice rumbled low, protective instincts flaring into something feral and raw. The house had changed since the last outage. Its silhouette bulked larger against the night sky, as if feeding on their fear like a living entity. He'd seen the reports. Strange scratches on doors, livestock vanishing in the fields without trace, and every fiber screamed to barricade them inside, away from whatever lurked in the void. But Evelyn twisted free, her anxiety sharpening into determination, blind to how her pursuit isolated her from his grasp, widening the chasm between them. The whispers grew, no longer faint echoes but layered voices, murmuring names, hers, Liam's, fragments of conversations long buried in the recesses of memory. Evelyn froze mid-step, the notebook slipping from her fingers to thump against the floor with a hollow echo. Excitement had sparked in her earlier, a thrill at piecing together the house's secrets, the blackouts' rhythm syncing with the community's unraveling. Now dread coiled tight, squeezing her chest like a vice. She wasn't alone. Footsteps? No. Scrapes, like nails dragging along plaster, circling just beyond the lantern's reach, teasing the edge of visibility. Liam knelt, retrieving the notebook, his ambition fracturing as doubt crept in like shadows at dawn. What if this was madness, not mystery? His fear gnawed, dismissal, his work branded delusion while the real threat ignored him entirely. "It's the house," he said, voice steady for her sake, but his free hand trembled against the wall, feeling the faint vibration beneath the paper-thin paint. Pulsing, alive, as if the structure breathed in rhythm with their fear. Jacob shoved past, positioning himself between them and the hall's yawning maw. "Lights out again soon. We don't chase ghosts." Paranoia laced his words, his overprotectiveness curdling into suspicion. Were the whispers targeting her, drawing her away into oblivion? He scanned the ceiling, where cracks spiderwebbed like veins, the structure groaning as if inhaling their breaths with deliberate slowness. The community buzzed with it now, shadows moving on their own, blackouts swallowing hours, the house at the center, bloating in their collective dread like a tumor. Evelyn pressed on, heart hammering against her ribs, the murmurs resolving into a single phrase. Stay. Uncover. Her control frayed at the edges, reality blurring. Madness or truth? She reached the hall's end, where the darkness pooled thick and viscous, and a chill breath ghosted her neck, raising the hairs there. Not alone. Never alone. Liam's pencil scratched on. Jacob's grip hovered ready to pull her back, the house exhaling secrets that bound them tighter in its unyielding vice. Hours blurred into a suffocating night, the lantern's flicker haunting Evelyn's every breath as shadows clung to the walls like unspoken curses. By dawn, the notebook's weight had transferred to Clara's trembling hands, Evelyn's sister, drawn into the same unraveling dread. Isolation gnawed at her, the house's oppressive silence amplifying the diary's whispered pull. Despair coiled tighter in her chest, urging a desperate act to sever the darkness before it consumed them all. Flames devoured the notebook's edges first, curling black veins across the pages before Evelyn's gasp cut the kitchen's stifling dark. She dropped the matchstick, watching ink-smeared words blister and warp in the sink's basin, the fire's acrid bite clawing at her throat like invisible talons. Jacob lunged from the corner, his boots scraping the linoleum, snatching a damp cloth to smother the blaze before it could leap to the counters. "What the hell, Ev? You could have burned the whole place down." Maya shrank against the fridge, her breath shallow and ragged, eyes wide in the lantern's feeble glow that Liam had left behind. The blackout pressed in, unbroken since the hallway shadows had swallowed his retreating form, leaving only the three of them in this suffocating pocket of the house. Evelyn's hands shook as she backed away, the heat still radiating from the ruined pages, her frantic scribbles on the blackouts, the house's pull, all reduced to ash and regret. She'd meant to end it, to purge the obsession gnawing at her mind like a parasite, but the whispers started then, faint as rustling leaves, seeping from the walls like breath from hidden lungs. "Let go," they murmured, threading through the silence. Not voices, but suggestions slithering into her thoughts like venom. "The truth is heavier than you can carry." Evelyn pressed her palms to her ears, heart slamming against her ribs in frantic protest. Jacob whirled toward her, his face etched with lines she'd never noticed before, deep furrows from nights spent barricading doors that never stayed shut. "Talk to me. What's happening?" His voice cracked, protective instinct flaring into something sharper, his hand hovering near her shoulder without touching, as if fearing she'd shatter, or worse, pull him under with her into the abyss. She couldn't answer. The whispers swelled, coiling around the memory of last week's outage, when the house had seemed to pulse, drawing her toward the attic stairs with inexorable force. Control. That was her anchor, always had been. But now it frayed, unraveling in the smoke that lingered, thick and cloying like a funeral pall. Maya whimpered, sliding down the fridge door to the floor, knees drawn up like a child evading shadows that loomed too close. "It's talking. Can't you hear it? We need to leave, Jacob, please." Her words dissolved into a sob, her withdrawal cracking open, fear spilling out raw and unchecked. She reached for his leg, but he stepped back, eyes darting between them, paranoia flickering. Was Evelyn's madness contagious, or was Maya the one breaking first under the strain? A low rumble built outside, not thunder but the house's retort, boards creaking in sympathy as wind howled against the windows, rattling panes like frantic fists pounding for entry. The storm erupted without warning, rain lashing the roof in sheets, though no clouds had gathered moments before, the sky remaining an oppressive void. Evelyn staggered to the sink, sifting through the char for any salvageable fragment, but only soot smeared her fingers like accusing ink. The whispers laughed now, soft and insidious. "You thought fire would free you? It binds us closer." Despair sank into her bones, heavy as the darkness that no lantern could pierce. Jacob pulled Maya to her feet, arm around her shoulders, his caution hardening into resolve. But Evelyn saw the lie in his eyes, the fear that protection meant nothing here, that the house would claim them all in its slow, inevitable grasp. She met their gazes, her determination crumbling, the illusion of safety she'd clung to dissolving like the ashes at her feet. They were trapped, not just in the blackout, but in the unraveling of their minds, whispers promising no escape from the tightening web. As the final wisps of smoke curled upward from the sink, Evelyn's chest tightened with a hollow ache, the burned words echoing in her mind like unspoken curses that refused to fade. Hours dissolved into uneasy silence, the night's oppressive veil thickening as she turned her thoughts to the farmhouse. There, Clara sat alone, the gathering tempest rattling the windows, its fury mirroring the dread coiling within her, a slow, inexorable hopelessness that blurred the line between the house's shadowed history and her fracturing sanity. A sharp crack split the air, the remnants of Evelyn's notebook splintering under Jacob's boot as he stamped out the last embers in the sink. The kitchen plunged deeper into shadow, the single bulb overhead flickering once before dying, leaving only the faint glow of dying coals to paint their faces in erratic orange hues. Jacob's breath rasped, his hand still clenched around the damp cloth, eyes darting to the doorway where Maya huddled against the wall, her knees drawn tight to her chest. "Liam," Jacob hissed, voice low and edged with command. "Get the flashlight from the pantry, now." He stepped toward Maya, his frame blocking the path to the hall, as if the darkness itself might slither in and claim her without mercy. The house groaned under the weight of the blackout, floorboards settling like bones in a grave, and Jacob's mind raced, visions of shadows uncoiling from corners, pulling his sister into whatever abyss Evelyn had just tried to burn away with desperate fury. Maya didn't look up. Her fingers twisted the hem of her sweater, nails digging into the frayed threads, the fabric damp from earlier tears she hadn't acknowledged, now cold against her skin. Escape clawed at her thoughts, a desperate itch to bolt through the back door into the night, away from this suffocating farmhouse that pressed in like a living thing, breathing their fear. But the door was across the room, past the table strewn with Liam's scribbled notes, and every step felt like surrender to the trap she'd always sensed closing around her with patient inevitability. "It's getting worse," she murmured, barely audible, her voice threading into the quiet like smoke from dying embers. She wanted to scream at Jacob to stop hovering, to let her breathe free, but the words stuck, her withdrawal a shield, cracking under the relentless strain. Liam fumbled in the pantry, his notebook tucked under one arm, the other groping shelves slick with forgotten dust that coated his fingers like grime. Curiosity burned brighter than fear, a compulsion to capture this, the blackout's sudden grip, the way the house seemed to pulse in response like a heartbeat. He'd jotted Evelyn's ravings earlier, ink smudged from the chaos, convinced this was the breakthrough, the proof that would silence the skeptics back in town. But as his fingers brushed cold metal, A whisper slithered through the walls. Not from the wind or the settling structure, but from within. Soft, insistent, like voices trapped in the plaster, echoing faintly. "Stay. See what we hid." He froze, heart thudding against his ribs like a drum in the confined space. The flashlight beam sputtered to life, cutting a thin yellow path, but it illuminated nothing, just the pantry's cluttered guts, jars of preserves clouded with age and neglect. Yet the whispers persisted, weaving into his ears. The farmer's wife, drowned in the well, her children watched. Images flickered unbidden, not memories but intrusions. A woman's pale face bloating in dark water, tiny hands pressing against a locked door. The farmhouse's beams stained with something darker than soot, a metallic residue. Liam's ambition twisted, his notes now a mocking weight. What if this wasn't discovery, but delusion creeping in? What if documenting it all branded him the fraud, lost in the very madness he chased without end? "Got it," he called, voice cracking as he emerged, beam swinging wildly across the room. It caught Maya's face first, her eyes wide and vacant, mirroring his own dawning horror in the pallid light. Jacob snatched the light, thrusting it toward the hall like a weapon against the void. "We're not staying here. Maya, up! Liam, watch the doors!" But the whispers swelled, no longer confined to Liam's head. Maya flinched, clutching her ears as they echoed for her too. "You can't leave. We never did." The illusion shattered then, the farmhouse no longer a refuge warped by grief, but a maw revealing its teeth, past atrocities bleeding into the present, sanity fraying like the notebook's ashes in the dim glow. Jacob's grip tightened on the flashlight, his protectiveness curdling into something feral, pushing Maya behind him even as she recoiled from his touch, the beam trembling in his hand. Liam scribbled furiously in the dim glow, but his hand shook, the words blurring into nonsense on the page. No escape, no understanding, just the house's endless hunger, drawing them deeper into hopelessness, where protection failed, curiosity blinded, and withdrawal offered no solace from the encroaching void. The darkness thickened, whispers curling around their ankles like roots, pulling them toward truths none could unsee without shattering. 3 days after the storm, the acrid smoke from the kitchen lingered in Evelyn's nostrils like a ghost, refusing to dissipate as blackouts gripped the village in relentless waves. Shadows thickened beyond the windows, compelling neighbors to seal their doors against an unseen threat, their footsteps fading into silence that pressed like a weight. Unease festered in the dim hours, Jacob's act a splinter under her skin, amplifying the oppressive weight pressing down on every breath she took. This can't be real. Evelyn's mind clawed at the edges of the thought, her pulse a dull throb against her temples as she gripped the edge of the kitchen table, wood rough under her palms. 3 days since the storm's fury had ripped through, and now this. Blackouts swallowing the village whole, one after another, like the earth itself was exhaling shadows that clung and spread. Outside, nails hammered into wood echoed faintly, neighbors fortifying their doors against whatever lurked in the endless night, the metallic ring sharp in the heavy air. But inside her own home, the barricades felt paper-thin, brittle as old bone. She glanced at Maya, hunched in the corner chair, knees drawn up like a child warding off ghosts that whispered in the corners. The girl's eyes darted to the window, where blackout curtains muffled the world beyond, heavy fabric absorbing the faint light. "I saw it again," Maya whispered, her voice cracking the silence like fragile glass. Frustration laced her words, a spark igniting in the dim lantern light that barely pushed back the gloom, casting long, distorted shapes. The house, it's not just standing there. It whispers, pulls at you. Last night, during the outage, I swear the walls in my room bent, like they were breathing my thoughts back at me, mocking every fear. Evelyn's fingers dug into the wood, splintering under her nails with a faint snap. Control. She needed control, not this unraveling that tugged at her edges. Her obsession with the house had already cost her Jacob's trust, his boot crushing her notes into ash right here in this kitchen, the memories still sharp. But Maya's words stirred something deeper, a mirror to her own fractured visions that haunted her sleep. "Whispers what?" Evelyn pressed, her tone sharper than intended, betraying the conflict churning inside like storm clouds. Family first, Liam and the boys needed her steady, not lost to madness that clawed closer. Yet the dread coiled tighter, exposing cracks in her grip that widened with each breath. Liam paced the narrow space, his footsteps scraping the worn linoleum, each one a distraction from the immediate weight pressing down like an unseen hand. Distant mysteries, that's what he'd chased for years. Old legends of the house on the hill, its pull on the mind like a siren's call echoing through fog. But now, with the power flickering out for hours at a time, reality demanded attention, cold and unyielding. "It's not the house," he muttered, more to himself than them, rubbing his chin where stubble rasped against his palm like sandpaper. He stopped, facing Maya, his eyes narrowing in the flickering light. Being dismissed again, labeled the skeptic when terror clawed at his own doubts. That fear gnawed deeper than he'd admit, a constant ache. "Tell me exactly what you heard. No embellishments." Maya uncurled slightly, her awakening defiance pushing through the frustration like a blade through silk. Trapped. Always trapped in silence, withdrawing when connection mattered most. But not now, not in this suffocating air. "It said my name, Liam. In my father's voice, the one who left when I was 6. Promised he'd come back if I just stepped closer to the window." Her breath hitched, the air thick with the scent of cooling stew forgotten on the stove, its metallic tang mixing with the musty damp seeping from the walls like sweat. She met Evelyn's gaze, the older woman's face etched in flickering amber from the lantern's flame, shadows hollowing her eyes. "And you? You've been sketching it non-stop. What does it show you?" Evelyn hesitated, the shadow of her control slipping away like mist. The testimonies from the village hall earlier that day replayed in her mind. Old Mrs. Harrow swearing the house had mirrored her dead husband's face in its windows. Young Tomas claiming it fed on his buried guilt over his sister's drowning. The words hanging heavy. Blurring lines, nightmare bleeding into flesh with viscous slowness. "It shows me losing them," she admitted, voice low, the words tasting like rust on her tongue. "Liam walking away, the boys vanishing into the dark. Like it's digging up what I can't face, unearthing it with cold fingers." Her drive warred with the fear, prioritizing family even as obsession blinded her to their shared unraveling. The room closing in. Liam sank into a chair, the wood creaking under him like a sigh, his obsession fracturing against the immediate horror that pressed close. "We're all seeing pieces of ourselves in it. The house isn't haunted. It's us, reflected back, warped and merciless." But even as he spoke, the lantern sputtered, plunging them into momentary black, the sudden void amplifying every creak, every shallow breath that echoed too loudly. Unease bloomed, a slow poison in their veins, the truth not in the structure on the hill, but in the psyches it mercilessly exposed like raw wounds. Outside, another hammer struck, a futile rhythm against the encroaching night that swallowed sound. The blackouts lingered like a shroud, Evelyn's dread seeping into the village's veins, fostering a suspicion that coiled tighter with each fading light. Hours blurred into an oppressive twilight, her pulse echoing the collective unease that hummed in the air. In a cramped, candle-flickered room nearby, Clara's visions gnawed relentlessly, compelling her to draw wary souls into the thickening gloom, where truths hovered just beyond the ridicule's edge, tantalizing and treacherous. That's when Evelyn realized the house wasn't just old, it was alive, feeding on the cracks in their minds, like roots burrowing through soft soil. She sat at the scarred wooden table in the village hall, the lantern's flame flickering across faces etched with exhaustion and hollow eyes. 3 days of blackouts had left the air thick with the scent of damp wool and unwashed skin, the kind that clung to your throat like a noose. Her hands, steady now despite the tremor she'd fought all morning, pushed the diary forward. Its leather cover, cracked and stained, seemed to pulse faintly under the light, as if breathing. "Liam, Jacob, listen," she said, her voice cutting through the low murmur of the few others who trickled in, their chairs scraping like accusations against the floor. "The visions aren't madness. The diary proves it. That house on the hill, it twists what we see. Eyewitnesses from the edge of the village swear they saw their own reflections in the windows, but not as they are, warped, screaming things from nightmares they've buried deep." Liam leaned back, his fingers drumming a slow rhythm on the armrest, eyes darting to the shadowed corners of the room, as if the walls themselves might lean in with malevolent intent. He wanted to anchor this in the now, the flickering power lines outside, the families huddled without light. But the pull of the unknown tugged harder, a distraction he couldn't shake from his thoughts. "Visions? Evelyn, we're talking about blackouts, not some ghost story. People are scared enough without chasing shadows that twist in the mind." His tone carried that edge, the fear of being labeled the fool who cried wolf, yet his gaze lingered on the diary, conflicted, as if it whispered secrets he half-craved in the dimness. Jacob shifted beside her, his broad shoulders hunched, the creak of his chair amplifying the strain in his neck like taut wire. Protection burned in him like a low fever, but paranoia laced every breath. What if this drew the darkness closer, inviting it in? He glanced at Evelyn, then at Liam, suspicion coiling in his gut, like smoke rising slow. "You're both missing it," he muttered, voice rough from nights without sleep, gravelly and worn. "If the house is doing this, blurring what's real, then trusting anyone, even each other, could be the trap. I saw it last night, in the blackout. Shapes in the fog that look like you, Liam, but twisted, laughing." His eyes narrowed, flicking between them, the weight of failing to shield them pressing down, alienating even as he reached for her hand under the table, fingers cold. The others in the room stirred, a farmer named Harrow snorting from the back with derisive force. "Diary? Visions? You're all losing it to the dark. Next you'll say the house ate the power grid." Laughter rippled, brittle and forced, like wind through dead leaves. But Evelyn felt it like barbs, ridicule masking their own dread, the terror of peering into psyches that might shatter under scrutiny, exposed and raw. She pressed on, flipping the diary open to a page smeared with frantic ink. Accounts of perceptions bending, realities fracturing into personal horrors that clawed free. It's not the house alone, it's us. It exposes what we hide, obsessions, fears. I've seen my family, Jacob, but not safe, pulled into voids I created by clinging too tight. Her words hung, slow and deliberate, the slow burn of truth uncoiling like a serpent. Liam's drumming stopped, his conflict deepening as immediate dangers, the village unraveling, clashed with the mystery's siren call that echoed in his ears. Jacob's grip tightened on her hand, paranoia flaring into outright suspicion. Was she slipping away? Or was this the protection he needed to embrace amid the gathering storm? The lantern sputtered, casting elongated shadows that danced like accusations across the walls, twisting in the flickering light. Suspicion thickened the air, each glance a probe into hidden fractures, the line between ally and threat blurring as the house's influence seeped in like damp rot. Evelyn's heart thudded, the realization solidifying. They were all exposed now, psyches laid bare in the oppressive quiet that smothered sound. As the meeting dissolved into uneasy murmurs, Evelyn lingered in the hall's stifling gloom, the blackouts stretching into a fourth merciless night. Across the shadowed village, Clara huddled by her window, the oppressive silence broken only by the creak of settling timbers that groaned like weary bones. Dread coiled tighter in her chest, the air heavy with unspoken horrors, until the faint buzz of her phone shattered the void, a desperate plea that blurred the line between nightmare and waking terror, insistent and chilling. The creak of the floorboard under her boot yanked Evelyn back, her father's voice, gravelly and urgent, whispering through the keyhole of her childhood bedroom door. "Don't let it in, Evie. It's already got your thoughts." She blinked hard in the dim village hall, the lantern's oily wick sputtering as if echoing that long-buried warning with mocking rhythm. 3 days of blackouts had stretched into this endless night, the air now laced with the metallic tang of fierce sweat, heavier than before, coating the tongue. Evelyn's hands clenched around the crumpled note she'd just unfolded, a frantic scrawl from old Mrs. Harrow, the villager who'd barricaded herself in the chapel steeple. "Saw them," it read, ink smudged like tears on the page. "Twisted things in the shadows, eyes like coals, pulling at the edges of the dark. They're real, Evelyn, coming for us." Jacob paced the scarred table's edge, his boots scraping deliberate furrows in the dust-caked floorboards, each step a metronome of fraying control that echoed too loudly. "We should have left yesterday," he muttered, eyes darting to the boarded windows where slivers of moonlight clawed through cracks like desperate fingers. His gaze fixed on Maya, huddled in the corner with her knees drawn up, her fingers twisting the frayed hem of her shawl with nervous tension. "This place isn't just rotting, it's twisting us. You feel it too, don't you?" Paranoia edged his words, sharp as a blade he couldn't sheathe, born from the drive to shield them all, even as it pushed Maya further into silence that deepened the rift. Maya's breath hitched, a shallow rhythm against the oppressive quiet that smothered the room. The blackout had ended an hour ago, leaving her head throbbing with fragments of dreams, elongated limbs snaking from the walls, whispering her name in voices that mimicked her mother's final pleas, raw and pleading. Frustration boiled beneath her awakening resolve. She wanted to scream that the house had burrowed into her fears, trapping her in this web of withdrawal that tightened with each breath. But the words stuck, heavy as lead in her throat. Instead, she lifted her chin, meeting Evelyn's eyes with a spark of defiance. "What does it say? The note. Tell us." Evelyn's pulse thrummed in her temples, the paper trembling not from cold, but from the conflict tearing at her core. Obsession with the house's pull, warring against the raw need to drag her family from its jaws before it snapped shut. She thrust the note toward them, voice fracturing like thin ice. "Grotesque figures. Lurking. Mrs. Harrow swears they're not hallucinations, that are nightmares." She trailed off, the realization sinking like roots into soft earth. The house had feasted on their shadows, manifesting the darkness they'd all buried deep within. Jacob snatched it, scanning the words, his face paling to wax under the lantern's glow. "This is it. The end. We arm ourselves, board every door." "No!" Maya's outburst shattered the tension, her voice finally breaking free, raw and unpolished, like a cry from the depths. She surged to her feet, shawl slipping to the floor in a whisper of wool that seemed too loud. "Hiding won't stop it. It's in us already. Your paranoia making you see threats everywhere, Evelyn. Your control choking us all." The accusation hung, igniting the spark that smoldered. Jacob whirled on her, grabbing her arm too roughly, his fear of losing them twisting into something feral and uncontrolled. "You think I want this? Keeping you safe is all I've got left." Evelyn stepped between them, but her hands shook with the madness nipping at her edges, the dread coiling tighter as shouts echoed from the hall's outer doors. Villagers' voices fracturing into screams, accusations flying like shards of glass in the dim. A crash outside, wood splintering with a sharp crack, and the acrid scent of smoke seeped through the boards like an omen. Relationships splintered in that moment, violence bubbling up from the chaos the house had sown with insidious care. Maya's eyes widened, not in anger now, but pure, unfiltered fear. The realization that the grotesque figures weren't just shadows, but mirrors of their unraveling souls, reflecting back distorted truths. Evelyn whispered, "It's happening," as the lantern flame guttered low, plunging them toward the brink with inexorable slowness. The echo of her father's warning clung to Evelyn like damp rot, seeping into the stifling air of the village hall. Hours blurred into a haze of shared whispers and shadowed glances among Clara and the others, the weight of unspoken fears pressing heavier with each passing breath that caught in their throats. By dusk, resolve cracked under the strain, drawing them inexorably toward the farmhouse's looming silhouette, where despair's cold fingers awaited to unravel them thread by thread. The metallic tang of blood lingered on Jacob's tongue, where he'd bitten his cheek to stifle a curse that burned hot. They trudged toward the farmhouse's silhouette, the village hall's lantern light fading behind like a discarded hope swallowed by the night. Gravel shifted underfoot, each step grinding against the weight of unspoken accusations that hung heavy. Jacob glanced back at Maya and Liam, his grip tightening on the rusted iron bar he'd scavenged. Protection, he told himself, not paranoia that clawed at his mind. But the shadows between the trees twisted like fingers reaching out, and doubt gnawed deeper, unrelenting. Why now? Maya's voice cracked the silence, sharp as splintered wood cutting through the chill. She halted midway up the overgrown path, her breath fogging in the chill that seeped from the earth itself, cold and clammy. Frustration etched lines around her eyes, awakening something fierce beneath her usual retreat into silence. We've danced around this place all night. If it's the house, if it's feeding on us, why march back like lambs to the slaughter? Liam barely registered her words, his gaze fixed on the farmhouse's warped door, half ajar as if mocking their approach with silent invitation. Distant mysteries pulled at him still, the etchings he'd glimpsed earlier, symbols whispering of forces beyond the veil, faint and teasing. It's not just the house, he murmured, conflicted, his fingers tracing invisible patterns in the air heavy with mist. There's a pattern, layers. We ignore the immediate and… He trailed off, the pull of the unknown drowning the crunch of their boots on the path, pulling him deeper. Jacob whirled on them, bar raised slightly, voice strained like a wire about to snap. Because we end this, I won't let it touch you. His eyes darted to the encroaching tree line, paranoia blooming like rot in damp wood. Trust or protect? The line blurred, and he saw it in their faces, alienation creeping in, his loved ones slipping toward the darkness he feared most, inch by inch. Stay close. It's watching, always watching. The air thickened then, not with wind, but with a pressure that pressed against their skulls, slow and inexorable like a vice tightening. No storm broke overhead. Instead, a low hum rose from the ground, vibrating through their bones like the farmhouse's hidden pulse, deep and resonant. Maya's knees buckled first. She clutched her throat, eyes widening as fragments clawed free from her mind's recesses. Trapped, always trapped, her father's rage-filled shouts echoing, the door slamming on her pleas for escape with finality. She couldn't control it, couldn't voice the scream building inside like pressure. Jacob, I never told you, she gasped, withdrawing even as the words tore out raw and bleeding. About the nights I wanted to run. From you. From all this. Liam staggered, the hum swelling into a chorus of his own doubts that drowned his thoughts. Visions flickered, villagers laughing behind his back, calling him the fool chasing ghosts while real threats circled unseen. Not taken seriously, dismissed, his obsessions blinding him to the blade at his throat, sharp and cold. It's real, he whispered. But the words dissolved into conflict, his drive fracturing like glass. Immediate dangers? The farmhouse loomed, its door yawning wider, but the mystery he'd chased now mocked him, pulling him under with relentless force. Jacob dropped to one knee, the bar clattering away, useless against the dread coiling in his chest like serpents. Protection failed, trust shattered into pieces. Whispers slithered into his ears, his own voice, twisted. You drove them away. Paranoia, not love. Maya curled fetal, her awakening voice silenced by the weight of isolation that crushed down. Liam clawed at the dirt, torn between revelation and ruin that beckoned. The farmhouse exhaled, a breath of mildew and regret, forcing their shadows to the surface. Broken bonds, unspoken violences, the house devouring their unraveling cores with slow hunger. Despair settled, heavy as lead in their veins, the path back erased by the chaos they'd invited without knowing. No violence erupted yet, only the slow collapse, their minds fracturing in the oppressive hush that smothered all sound. Inside the farmhouse's shadowed confines, the group's uneasy silence thickened like clotting blood, unspoken accusations festering into gnawing paranoia that spread unseen. Jacob slumped against the wall, his bitten cheek throbbing with dull pain, while Clara paced the creaking floorboards, the diary clutched in trembling hands that betrayed her. Hours bled into the oppressive night, dread coiling tighter with each flickering candle flame that guttered low, her mind a whirlwind of imagined betrayals from the villagers beyond the walls. Desperation finally eclipsed fear, drawing her inexorably toward the ritual's forbidden script, words that promised release but whispered ruin. The echo of footsteps that had trailed them from the village hall now vanished into the crunch of gravel under the farmhouse door. Maya paused at the threshold, her hand hovering over the rusted knob, the absence of any welcoming light inside, pressing like a void against her chest, cold and expansive. She glanced back at Liam and Evelyn, their faces half-shadowed in the dim moonlight, filtering through the overgrown vines that clawed at the frame. The air inside the house carried no scent of home, no wood smoke, no faint trace of bread from forgotten meals. Just the stale hollow of abandonment, thick and unmoving, like a held breath. "We can't turn back now," Maya said, her voice a low thread cutting the quiet, frustration edging her words like a blade she was only beginning to sharpen against the stone. She pushed the door open, hinges groaning in protest like tortured joints, revealing the cluttered parlor where dust motes hung suspended, undisturbed for what felt like years in the still air. Her fear clawed at her. The trap of this place, walls closing in without mercy. But she stepped forward anyway, driven to claim some fragment of control, to speak into the chaos that had swallowed the village whole with its maw. Liam lingered behind, his eyes darting to the corners where shadows pooled deeper than they should, swallowing light. No reassuring creak of floorboards from imagined inhabitants. No distant murmur to ground him in the here and now amid the gloom. His obsession with the unseen pulled at him, distant whispers of the house's mysteries drowning out the immediate rot of the floorboards beneath his boots, splintered and treacherous. "This isn't about riddles anymore," he muttered, more to himself than the others, conflicted gaze flicking between Maya and the diary clutched in Evelyn's hands like a relic. He feared their dismissal, the weight of being the fool who chased ghosts while real fractures split them apart, widening with each moment. Evelyn clutched the leather-bound book tighter, its pages yellowed and brittle, the absence of her usual iron resolve mirroring the empty hearth before them, cold and lifeless. She had dragged them here, her drive to confront the obsession that gnawed at her, warring with the pull toward her family's shattered remnants back in the village. Distant cries in the night. "I found this in the attic last night," she whispered, voice fraying at the edges, frustration boiling into something desperate and raw. Madness lurked in her fear, a grip slipping on the threads of reality, her need for control blinding her to Maya's tense stance, to Liam's averted eyes that hid turmoil. Clara's notes. "It's a ritual. It can end this. Banish whatever's twisting us from within." Clara emerged from the shadowed hallway then, her face gaunt, eyes wild with the same desperation that had infected them all since the darkness first seeped from the house's bones like black sap. She was one of them. A villager frayed by nights of sleepless watching, now the spark in the tinder, ready to ignite. "Let me do it," Clara pleaded, snatching the diary from Evelyn's unresisting fingers with urgent need. Her hands moved with frantic precision, arranging candles scavenged from the kitchen. 5 stubs, unlit, their wax cold and inert against the wood. No flicker of flame yet, but the promise hung in the air, heavy with unspoken peril that thickened the atmosphere. Maya watched, awakening frustration surging as she opened her mouth to protest, but the words stuck, her shadow of withdrawal sealing her lips like a seal. Liam shifted, torn between pulling them away and the allure of what might unfold. His distraction from the immediate, a loose floorboard creaking under Clara's weight, blinding him to the rising hum in the room that vibrated low. Clara began, voice a monotone chant pulled from the pages, words twisting like smoke though no fire burned to give them form. Salt scattered in a hasty circle, the grains whispering against wood with faint scratches. At first, nothing, just the oppressive void deepening, pressing in. Then, a ripple, subtle as a held breath, released into the stillness. The air thickened, not with scent, but with fragments. A child's muffled sob that wasn't there, the scrape of nails on unseen walls, the bitter aftertaste of betrayal on tongues that parted in surprise. Eyes widened. Maya's gaze snapped to Liam. Had he always carried that flicker of doubt? Like he knew more than he let on? A hidden blade? Liam recoiled from Evelyn, her clutching fingers now suspect, as if she'd planted the diary herself to drag them deeper into the pit. Evelyn's mind fractured further, whispers accusing Maya of silent complicity, of withdrawing when they needed her voice most to pierce the gloom. Paranoia bloomed, hot and insidious, hidden terrors uncoiling from within, old grudges resurfacing as snarls, secrets spilling like blood from split veins that wept slow. Clara staggered back as the circle broke, chaos erupting, not from the house, but from them, raw and uncontained. A shove, a curse, hands grasping at throats in blind accusation that clawed. The village's fragile trust shattered, sanity fracturing into shards that cut deep into flesh and mind. Maya lunged forward, voice finally breaking free in a shout that echoed, but the damage rooted, irreversible. The darkness no longer confined to walls but woven into their marrow, an oppressive normal where every shadow hid a knife waiting to strike. That night, the farmhouse's shadows deepened, enveloping Maya, Liam, and Evelyn in a suffocating hush as they crossed the threshold. The void in Maya's chest expanded, threading dread through the air like invisible roots burrowing into their minds with slow persistence. Hours bled into a slow, oppressive vigil, where unspoken fears festered, pulling Clara inexorably toward the abyss of her own unwitting betrayal. The darkness she had stirred, now rising to claim them all in its grasp. Outside, the gravel's faint crunch fading into silence. Inside, Evelyn's breath, ragged and echoing off the farmhouse walls, like a confession unwillingly given. She stepped over the threshold first, the wooden floor groaning under her weight, splintered boards snagging at her shoe with tiny tugs. Liam followed, his lantern casting jagged shadows that danced like accusations across the dust-choked room, motes swirling in the beam. Jacob lingered at the door, his knuckles white against the frame, eyes scanning the corners, as if the darkness itself might lunge from the gloom. "Evelyn," Liam whispered, his voice a thread, pulling at the quiet that pressed close. He set the lantern on a warped table, its flames sputtering against the chill that seeped from the walls like icy breath. "We shouldn't have come back, not after what happened at the hall." She ignored him, drawn to the hearth where embers from some forgotten fire smoldered black and lifeless. Her fingers traced the mantle, dislodging flakes of soot that clung to her skin like secrets unearthed from the grave. The air tasted metallic, laced with the rot of damp earth rising from the floorboards, heavy on the tongue. Jacob shut the door with a deliberate click, the sound sealing them in, his paranoia etching lines deeper into his face like carvings. "We have to face it," Evelyn said, her words measured, each one a step toward the fracture she felt widening inside, slow and inevitable. Frustration coiled in her chest, hot against the cold dread that numbed her limbs. She dragged them here, convinced the house held answers to the whispers that had started in the village. Whispers that twisted into screams when the darkness spilled out like ink. But now, standing in the oppressive gloom, she saw it. The villagers' eyes at the hall, hollowed by something she'd stirred without mercy. Jacob crossed the room in 2 strides, his hand clamping her shoulder with urgent force. "This isn't protection, Evelyn. It's madness. You're pulling us under with you." His voice cracked, strained from nights without sleep, watching shadows for threats that blurred into his own fears, indistinguishable. He wanted to shield them, to bolt the door against the world that clawed outside. But her obsession eroded that resolve, turning his vigilance into isolation that echoed in the empty space. Liam paced, distracted, his gaze flicking to the window where moonlight sliced through grime-streaked glass like pale knives. The distant mysteries he'd chased, tales of the house's curse, faded against the immediate weight of this room, the way Evelyn's resolve dragged them deeper into the mire. "She's right about one thing," he muttered, conflicted, rubbing his temples where tension throbbed. "The village, it's changed, but not because